Hi there. This is the brand new DJI Action 5 Pro camera cage from Telesin. And it is different from their existing camera cage in a big way. And I'm going to explain the difference between this cage and this cage because you may want to buy both cages because they have different uses. And if that's got your curiosity piqued, well, keep watching because you're watching Blue Collar Guy. Okay, we're back. So what makes this cage different from this cage? Well, before I tell you that, I need to say that Telesin did send me this cage out for review, but this is not a sponsored video, and I'm just going to compare this cage from their existing camera cage. So if you'd like to see the video on this camera cage, I do have a full video in the description, so you can just click on that and check out that video. So let's go to the downward shot and we're going to see what the difference is between these two cages. Okay, so we're at the downward shot and we've got this camera cage. So this is the brand new one and this is the existing one. So what is the difference between this camera cage and this camera cage? Well, let's get it out of the box. I did take a sneak peek at it, so if you're wondering, my curiosity got me just as much as yours did. All right, so if you look at them side by side, they look like they're about the same size, but the writing on this one is horizontal and the writing on this one is vertical. Because I did mention that for people that do vlogging and TikTok, this is a very, very good camera cage, because it's got a cold shoe mount here and a cold shoe mount here. And if you look at this camera cage, it only has one cold shoe mount here. But if you look at the top of it, this one has a button for the start and stop on the camera, and this one just has an empty hole. If you look at the bottom of the cage, they both have the same type of opening. If you look at the side of the cage, well, they both have this part. They both have the 1/4-20 and they both have this magnetic mount. But this one, it's on the other side. So how interesting is that? So why would the opening be on this side and the other one's on the other side? Well, I'm going to go back to me for a second. So one of the biggest complaints that some people had with Telesin's existing camera cage was if they wanted to change the battery or if they wanted to change the SD card, they had to take the whole camera out of the cage to do that. And they found that to be a little annoying. So they put the door on the opposite side so you could have access to the battery compartment. And that was pretty clever because a lot of camera cage manufacturers that did camera cages for the DJI Action series cameras put two hinges on the cage. So they had a hinge point on this side for loading the camera and then on this side for accessing the battery door. But I mentioned in my other video, and you might want to see that video, that creates 2 points of failure. So the more hinges you have on something, the more that can go wrong with the cage. So you've got one hinge over here, and if you had another one over here, if you were using this camera cage in a very rough environment, and let's say the camera broke away from the mount and started tumbling down the hill like so, it's going to hit on the corners. And when it hits on the corners, that could create a point of failure because that is where the hinges are. So the less hinges you have on a cage, the better the situation will be. So they created a brand new camera cage that had a hinge on the other side. They also created a little bit more space because on the Action 5 Pro, I noticed it was a little bit more snug to get into the cage. Now, on the new cage, it also fits the Action 4 and the 3, so if you're curious, I'm going to show you that. So let's go back to the downward shot. Here is the 5 Pro, and here is the 3, and here is the 4. So we'll put them in order. Now, before we do that, I'm going to just weigh the cages because I don't know if that's going to make a significant impact or not. But we're going to find out. And this one here says it's 54 grams. And I'm just going to zoom in a bit so you can read that a little more clearly. So 54 grams. And then if I take off this one and put the new one on, it is 57 grams. Why is it 57 grams? Well, if you look on the back of it, it's got a little bit more metal, and then it's got this extra button over here. So that's going to add some weight. So I'm just going to shut this off and put it over there. And my scale is not a professional scale. It just gives you an idea. So don't beat me up about the scale too much. I noticed that some people made some comments about the scale saying, well, your scale is not as accurate as well. It's not meant to be a super accurate scale. It's just to give you an idea of what these things weigh so that, you know, give or take a few grams here or there. So let's go back to the downward shot and let's test out this cage. So this is the Action 3. And I'm going to put the Action 3 here, and I'm going to see if this camera cage fits in the Action 3. And I have to load it in this way because the battery door goes on this side. So you're going to load it in backwards compared to the other cage. And as you can see, the Action 3 fits just fine. And if you want to access the button, you can just hit the button and it will turn on the camera. And after it turns on the camera, I don't know if I have an SD card in this one. I do. So I'm just going to shut that one off. And oh, I'm going to power it off. There we go. All right. And it's going to shut itself off. So I'm going to take this camera out of the cage. Okay. Then I'm going to load in the 4. Here's the 4. 4 slides in, no problem. And it's not loose or anything. It's just, it doesn't rattle or anything like that. I'm going to test this one out. So if you have a 4, hit the button. It's turning on. And well, it shut off because I didn't swipe up, but you get the idea. It fits, the button works. So take this one out. Now I'm going to put in the 5. So this is why they made the cage, because the 5 is a little bit tighter than the other two. It's a little bit thicker. And if I hit the button, it will turn on, and as you can see, the 5 Pro boots up and starts recording a lot faster than the other two. And then if I turn this off, there we go. So this cage works really, really well with the 5 Pro. It does work with the other ones, but it works extremely well with the 5 Pro. I'm also going to just grab a tripod here really fast and see if it mounts okay. So it mounts okay on the tripod. Go back to me for a second. So as you can see, it's mounted onto the tripod just fine. Everything's good on there. And I can unhook it okay. I can hook it onto this side and it works okay. So you can still do your vertical mount, but you've just got the one cold shoe on this cage. Now we're going to go back to the downward shot, and I'm going to show you what I mean about how tight it is when you put this camera in the other cage. So let's go back down to the downward shot. So as you can see, now I have access to the battery door. That is one of the main reasons why they made this cage, so that you could flip it open, have access to the battery door, and change your battery if you want to, or change your SD card. And as you can see, it comes out rather easily. Now when I put it in this cage, it's got a different release mechanism, and I'm going to load it in this way. So I don't have access to the battery door because it's against the part that doesn't load. And yes, it fits, but it's a bit snug in this one. So it's super tight in this one, but it fits, and so do the other ones too. This one was originally designed for the Action 4. So this one has 2 cold shoe mounts. So if you wanted to have lighting and things like that, you're doing TikTok videos, you know, this one here also has the, you can read it here. So if you're doing TikTok, this is more of a, I guess, a TikTok cage than it would be like a vlogging cage as opposed to an action camera cage. And that's the best way I would describe these 2 cages, like the major differences is this one is more set up for vlogging and this one is more set up for hardcore action. So, and if you want to know what I would define as that, so if you'd like to know what I would consider to be hardcore action for a cage like this, then here's a little clip I've prepared for you. Okay, so you've seen that clip, and you know that's some examples of what you would use this type of cage for. So the advantage of this cage over this cage would be this little button over here, because it's going to protect your existing camera button from having the acids and stuff from your fingers getting onto the plastics and eating away at your camera. So your remote control would be a good example of that, because after a while you can't read the buttons anymore, and that's from the acids from your fingers. They eventually dissolve it. So this would prevent the longevity of that start and stop button, because you're using it for action, and plus your fingers are going to be not ideally clean in some of those scenarios that I just gave you. And you're also going to be using thick gloves in some of those scenarios. Like if you're skydiving, you're going to have gear on and you're going to want a good solid button to press. So some people might say that other camera cages have 2 doors. So they say, well, I've got 1 door for loading and 1 door for the battery compartment, and that is better. And it may be more convenient, but it's also a lot worse as far as points of failure are concerned. So if you're going down the side of a mountain, like I showed you with the bicycles and stuff, your camera could tumble like so. It's going to hit on the corners more than likely as it's tumbling down and hitting rocks. Or if you're in the city doing some cycling and your camera gets separated from your mount, or maybe you didn't click it on there very good, because I've noticed that sometimes when I click my camera on my mounts, I have to make sure I give it a little bit of a tug to make sure that it's locked in place. Some people think it's locked in, but it's just the magnet holding it. So then it becomes separated from its mount, and then you have this tumbling situation. And that's where only having 1 hinge is a benefit, because you only have a single point of failure instead of 2 points of failure. And I mentioned that in my last video. So I'm going to take this camera out of the cage and show you how it's more of a fight to get it in and out than it is on the newer design. So let's go to the downward shot and we'll take a look at that. So I'm going to take it out of this one, and I have to kind of pull on the lens here to get it out. So it's a little bit more snug, and this one here loads in from this side. And as you can see, it goes in a little bit smoother. It's a lot smoother on this one than it is on the other one. and if I undo it, it just slides right out. So it's a lot better that way, as opposed to this one here that loads. You see, it's more of a push. You have to kind of like push it in there and then get it out that way. It's a little bit more snug, and it probably will wear down a little bit over here and here, because that's where I think the design has changed a little bit. It's just a little tiny bit thicker. So it's not a huge issue. Like you can get it in and out, but you know, it's definitely not as easy as it is on this one. So, and then that one just clips in like so. Now, the other thing about this one is look where the microphones are. So the microphones on this one, I'm just going to zoom in a bit here. Let me just zoom in. Oh, hang on. There we go. So on this one here, the microphones are right here. And if I put it in the other camera cage, I want to show you where the microphones are going to sit. So on this one here, the microphones are hidden behind this little hole here. Now, it doesn't make that much of a difference, I've noticed. However, there is a slight difference between that. If you have anything partially obstructing these, then it could impact your sound quality if you're just using the internal microphones. So I'm going to go back to me for a second. So if you're using an action camera cage in an action scenario like the ones that I showed you, you're not going to be using the DJI Mic 2. You're not going to be using the DJI Mic Mini. Imagine going skydiving and you got the Mic Mini or the Mic 2 strapped to you. There's a good chance you're going to end up losing those microphones. They're going to blow right off of you and they're going to go flying around someplace. Or you may be going on a water slide and you know, these are not waterproof. So you're going to want to rely on the internal microphones in those scenarios. When I'm using the neck clip that I got from Telesin, let me just go grab that. Okay, I'm back. So when you're using the neck mount from Telesin and you're clipping it on your neck like so, and you take the camera and then you want to put it on here like so, right? And you want to give it a little bit of a tug, because that's usually what I do, is I give it a little bit of a tug to make sure that it's mounted properly. So see, I give it a little bit of a tug. Now I've got the camera mounted to the neck mount. So I'm not going to use a wireless microphone because I don't need to. I've got the microphone right by my mouth. Why would I use a wireless microphone if the microphone is right here? I don't need to. And that is another example of why the Action Series 1 would be better for action, because it doesn't cover the microphones as much as the other one did. Now, I'm not talking about a huge difference here. You can still hear the microphones just fine with this one. We're talking about a minute, almost indiscernible difference between this one having the hole up here and this one not covering the holes at all. But common sense would tell you that when you don't cover the holes at all, you're going to have a little bit better response with your microphones. That's just common sense. So why would you want to get both of these camera cages? Well, this one here is specifically for vlogging because it's got two cold shoe mounts. Now you can use this for action. You can put this on your bicycle and go down the side of a mountain, and you can rest assured it's going to be just as safe in this cage as it is in this cage. But this one is more purpose-built for action. It has a dedicated separate button. It has a battery compartment door on this side so you can access your battery. So if you're out filming and you're doing a lot of biking and things like that, you're probably going to go through a lot more batteries than you would if you're just vlogging. Now, the other thing too is that if you're vlogging, it's easy for you just to, you're going to stop off in your car, or you're going to be able to sit down someplace and you're going to be able to take your time. You can pull the camera out. You can switch your batteries if you need to. You can change your SD card at your leisure. You could even plug in an external battery bank and charge up your camera that way. So if you're doing something that is more action oriented, you may want to have easier access to that battery compartment. And that was one of the complaints that some people had. For me, it wasn't a big deal, but I was curious about this cage. So I actually asked Telesin to send me this so I could see what the difference was. I also noticed that there wasn't any other videos on this new cage. I'm going to put a link in the description to Telesin's website so that you can look at either cage and pick out which one is best suited for you, because you may want this one or you may want to get the new one. And I think that they both have a certain benefit. I'm certainly going to be using both of these. I do think that this new one it's a lot better fit for the Action 5 Pro in that it slides in and out of the cage a lot more smoothly. So the one thing we can take away from this is that Telesin does listen to their customers. Their customers said that they wanted the door on the other side, and they did that. Some of their customers said, we wish we had this little button up there, like some of the other manufacturers did, and they did that too. One thing that they did better was, instead of having two hinges, they just put one, and I think that was a smart move. The less things that are moving on a product, the less things that can get broken on a product. So the one thing that I'd like to give Telesin credit for is that they offer two different cages for the same product, because they have a little bit different uses. And I think that is a nice idea. Let the consumer decide which one that they would prefer. Do you want two cold shoe mounts, or do you want one cold shoe mount and easier access to your battery compartment? So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed making it, and I have some other videos that are going to be coming out really soon. I've got some new products, and I've got some on the way as well. So take care, be safe at work, and I will see you at the next video.